it's Don the Auction Professor. I wanted to throw a bolo out at you here. This is something, you know, that we've even shown here occasionally, just incidentally, that I thought I'd bring to your attention here. One item that we do sell a lot of, and I do mean quite a lot of, are yearbooks. And again, I did the critique the other day, and you can see actually he has a yearbook up too. Yearbooks do sell, and they do sell very well, and routinely sell for very well. There's a little trick to it, though. You want the newer yearbooks, for the most part, the ones in the last, say, 70s, 80s, 90s, even in the 2000s, for people who lost their yearbook or are trying to reminisce. That's where I sell the majority of my yearbooks for decent money, 30, 40 bucks a piece on average for decent newer yearbooks. Now, you can also sell vintage yearbooks, but they just don't seem to sell as high as the newer ones, unless they're from like a major university or something really special, like John Wayne went to school there, or Prince was at school there and it has his picture in there. Things like that. Yearbooks of celebrities always sell. We're going to go over to the screen now, and I'm just going to show you some and give you some real good ideas on what to look for. Okay, so yearbooks today I'm going to talk about. It's not a huge area, so this isn't going to be a long video today, but yearbooks in general I always look out for. There are some yearbooks that sell for thousands. We've gotten, you know, 400 or 500 for a yearbook depending on the issue. And people see these and pass these up all the time. I pick up whatever I can on yearbooks. Sometimes we're lucky enough to get a huge lot at an auction or from one of my pickers. But there's some keys you need to look for when you're buying yearbooks. Not every yearbook is worth a ton of money. Overall, most yearbooks sell for at least like $9 or $10. So if you're paying $1, $2, or even $3, you're at least going to get your money back and then probably double it on pretty much most any yearbook. There might be a few that might take a long time to sell or that won't go for much money at all. But overall, there's a huge sell-through rate for what we get. But I do, again, I research everything. So what you want to do is research these. Look these up a little bit better when you see them on the street. But let's just go. This is the actual total amounts that are listed. Now, this is a little bit misleading because there's other things that are listed as a yearbook in here. So it's hard to actually break them down by, you know, school versus the other unless you're opening up several different categories, because from what I see, people list yearbooks in collectibles, sporting, books, and I think I've even seen them in other categories, like, yeah, even entertainment, music. So they list them in many different categories. They think if it's a musician in the book, they'll list them in the music section. If it's a sports person in the yearbook, they'll list them sometimes in the sports section. So the overall sell-through rate isn't great from what you look at here, but when you take out all the other things, it improves greatly. So I'm not going to break it down by each individual category. The overall thing you want to look for is the type. So it doesn't really matter where they listed because they do sell in each one of those categories. I usually list them in collectibles in the college and university collectibles section or the elementary and high school section. That's usually where I list every single yearbook that I get, and they do sell very well in there. But again, there are other options. You can play around with them. Title and such forth like that does make a difference. But overall, I just list them in those two sections I said. So if you look over here, you see there's 102,000 listings with the word yearbook in there. And again, there's magazines that have yearbook in the title. There's, you know, so many other options that have yearbook in the title. So don't let that discourage you. If you see 102 up and you look at the sold section, which we're going to do, and I believe it's like 25%. Yeah, it's around 25% if you compare these two columns. But again, these do not take into account that some aren't really yearbooks. Like you see here, stamps. Like you see here, stamps. There's stamp yearbooks, there's comic yearbooks, there's magazine yearbooks, and those are just like a yearly, you know, combined issue. So those aren't even really yearbooks. So there's a lot in here that's not actually yearbooks. So we're just going to not consider that or worry about that at all. And as you see, as I said, there's a ton that were up and only a small portion that's sold. So we're just going to look today at just the sold ones so you can get an idea on the values on some of these. Now, like these are car yearbooks. I wouldn't consider those as anything. This is what you're looking for here, something along this line, these yearbooks. Because what happens with yearbooks are these people who weren't famous back in the day when they were in school signed these yearbooks. Sometimes you'll get yearbooks that have 2 key signatures in them, and then they'll sell for a ton of money. Like Mississippi ones. We lived in the state. I did sell, you know, some high-dollar Mississippi ones. We sold a Meridian, Mississippi one for almost $500. overall, it really what's important is that it's a specific yearbook from a specific area. Like this one here is a Mississippi one. This is Elvis Presley, and what's key about this one is, as most yearbooks, he signed it. He wrote a little memo, he signed it. This went for $3,000 on a buy it now. That could have went for $5,000 had the person put it up higher. $3,000 for an Elvis yearbook is pretty cheap, honestly. Like here, you've got Michael Jordan signed high school yearbook. It went for, I'm guessing, like $2,300, somewhere in that range. Following in the price as it goes down, you can see this is in the $2,000, $2,200 range. Like right here, Jack Nicholson signed yearbook, $1,799 on a buy it now. Derek Cheater, Kalamazoo. Again, these are what you look for. Now around here, I looked up who famous went to schools around here and who would be worth money, so I know which yearbooks to look for. I save on my phone. I have a list of all the key yearbooks that are important, and all I do is open up my phone if I run into some yearbooks. If I see them and they're $1, I usually just buy them anyway, regardless of anybody famous in them, because they do still sell. Even at $2 and $3, I still will buy big bulk lots of them, but at $3, I'm a little more picky on them. Like here, Stevie Nicks. You just got to look out for stuff like this, because these yearbooks show up, nobody thinks a thing about who is in them, and they don't have to have signed them to actually be worth a ton of money. Like here is Steve Jobs. These just went for unsigned, just standard flat yearbooks. Person probably paid a couple bucks a piece for them. They sold for $815. Like on here, they're centering in like I do. They zoomed in just on key photo here for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and a yearbook that he was in. So you've got to just look out for yearbooks. Yearbooks always seem to sell for us. And again, there's not just school yearbooks so in this listing, so don't just consider that. Just kind of not pay attention to those. We're only looking at the university yearbooks and the high school yearbooks and things like that. Jerome, Arkansas. I mean, it just depends on what you're looking for. This one went for $750. Meridian, as I said, I've sold for $500. $700 for this one here. So yearbooks in general sell very well. Now, if they're not an old yearbook, the other yearbooks that sell well are yearbooks from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. And why do those still sell? They sell because people have lost their yearbook. They didn't get one when they were around, or whatever the case may be. Yearbooks for most schools are made to order, and they only make a few extra. A small grouping extra are printed on any specific school because of cost. Schools these days, even from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, are always worried about cost in printing these, so they only print enough with a few extra to compensate for those that might have missed the deadline. So for yearbooks, the newer ones still sell, but they sell because people actually don't have a yearbook of their own school time. I am one of those people too. I have bought yearbooks just because I was in them. So, just keep that in mind. I've also collected ones that my father was in. So, for my mother, I've given them to her because she never had copies of these. My father's passed long ago when I was 17. So for me, I, collect certain things like that or look out for them. So I've collected and looked into yearbooks for a long time. So that's what you really want to worry about. And again, back down to the yearbooks that you see, like Ole Miss. Now, Mississippi is a different story. That's a little out of the ordinary. I lived in the States, so we saw them. So I know that those are worth something. But other yearbooks, like Notre Dame, this is from 1906. And it's just things just like this. And as I said, there's other things like stamps, like right here is a stamp yearbook. Different story, not what we're looking about, not what we're talking about either. LeBron James, right here, his middle school. So it doesn't even have to be high school to be worth something. I run into them from middle schools. Now, the amount of middle schools that are available, a lot of middle schools never made yearbooks, so you might not find as many middle schools. Plus, there was less students usually in a middle school, so there won't be as many of those around. But they do sell, like right here you've got Michelle Obama's, $600 for a Princeton University one. Now those main colleges I always buy, like a Harvard or Princeton, those are pretty much always worth something, even if they aren't anybody famous in them. So that's just another thing. But as I said, there's magazines that have yearbooks in the title and such forth, like NASCAR yearbooks that show, who's raced that year and the whole works. So I'm only literally talking about the school yearbooks. Those are what matters to me, and those are the ones that I look for. So, like the football ones and stuff, yeah, sure, they're worth something too, but I just don't run into those as much as I do the other ones. So Clemson, you know, here's another one, $500. Pittsburgh Pirates, again, this is back to, you know, the actual sports teams yearbook. So again, we don't consider on those. But again, like here's Kiss. They went to school at a certain place. Here's Jim Morrison, The Doors. Actually, they did what was good. They actually centered in just on his picture. Now, a yearbook like this, as I said, you always zoom in on the images. A yearbook like this is only going to sell because Jim Morrison went there or because someone else went there and wanted a copy of the yearbook. So chances are a person's not going to buy a yearbook, you know, at $500 just to get a copy of themselves at that. So you're selling this one just because of this one image in the yearbook, Jim Morrison. That's the only reason this one sells for $500 plus. Now on this one here, they could have put $1,000 possibly on it and still sold it at that. So this is where I don't always pay attention to what the buy it now says, because just because it's sold at that, again, I've said this many times, doesn't mean that's all it was worth. That just means that the person who put it up only put $500 on it and it's sold. So again, I would have put more than that on the Doors, but that's just me. But again, when you're looking at this, you can see that there's a ton of value, even as you go down. The newer ones, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, those you usually get about 30 or 40 bucks for, unless it's one that's really hard to come by, and you've got a couple people looking for that newer yearbook. You might get 100, 150 bucks for even some of these. So again, this is just a thing that you want to look for. These are a BOLO every day in my book. And I do find stuff like this if I'm out. I always find yearbooks almost every trip, even at thrift stores. Savers, I've pulled them out many, many, many times. Goodwill, Salvation Army, flea markets, antique malls, garage sales even as well too, where somebody will have their yearbook, their husband's yearbook, their kids' yearbooks, or anything like that. Kids aren't interested in them, don't care, and I do buy those too. And usually, as I said, $1 to $3 is the average price I buy yearbooks for. I almost never have spent more than $3 unless it was a very specific, like a Yale or Columbia or Harvard or, you know, MIT or any of those kind of books. Those I've spent 10, 15, 20 bucks on, but I've gotten a lot higher profit out of those. But again, this is just a quick BOLO. These are things that you're going to have to go in and look for, but if you spend some time looking, you're going to see a ton of just standardized yearbooks going for a ton of money. Like this one here. These are nothing special. These are Fisk University. It's a standardized college, but the artwork on them is horrendously awesome. This is just typical here. And again, many famous people, Curtis Mayfield, Jesse Jackson, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the famous people, the photos of it. Now this one here, Janis Joplin, I would have centered in on Janis Joplin's photo and went from there. Some of these military ones, these will sell too, but again, they're not quite the same. It is basically a school one for the Air Force Academy, but you know, there's different yearbooks you look for. So the word yearbook in general, in a book form, on something rare that's going to have somebody good in it is what you're looking for. And as you see, they do sell regularly. So, I mean, like right here, this is Slayer. That's not somebody that a lot of people know, but Slayer was around in my time. They still have records out. You know, they've got some songs that I do listen to. So, you know, this is just something oddball. This is an oddball one that most people would have even passed up, even the ones that look for yearbooks. So just a little bit of research, and you can be rolling in some good profits from items like this. Let's pop down, like Madonna's here. Again, this one sells usually for the $500 range, at least all the ones that I've seen. Person priced it too low. And as you see, they didn't even list the school it came from. It's just the fact that it's hers. That's all that matters. And they did great. They listed just her picture. So again, this is an area most people don't know about. Don Henley, you know, again, nothing special. Yearbooks that you see all the time, unless you know that they went to that college or have a list of those, you're not going to know. You're not going to be worried about stuff like that. Is there a list and a site? There is some information you can get. I'll probably post that in a future video. But there is places that you can find lists of who is who and which yearbooks to look for. And again, as I said, I may address that in a future video. But as you see, as I drop down, there's still a ton that's sold. There's still, you know, other things in here. This is kind of mixed now, so it's a little confusing. But if you sort through these, you're going to see things like this, like here. This person probably has $1 or $2 each into them, sold them for $130. He could have sold them for more. So, and again, there's more than just one type of yearbook, so just keep that in mind. Another one, high school yearbook, Salem, Oregon, unmarked, 129 bucks. If you look through these, as I recommend to always research and do your own research, look at some of these yearbooks here. Look at them yourself. Look up, spend 20, 30 minutes just eyeballing some yearbooks. Just pick some random ones. Like here, again, Tanya Harding. These are yearbooks that show up all the time. 80s yearbooks, Milwaukee High School. It doesn't even really matter the school even on some of the yearbooks. It's just a yearbook in general. Vince Vaughn, you know. And again, they did a great job. They centered in on the image, just like I said. That stands out over something that just shows the cover of the book. The people are buying them for that guy's image, so show his image in the listing when you're doing these. But again, you can see how well these sell. Scottsdale Christian High School yearbook. They missed, I don't know what the 183 is. That's probably, who knows. Maybe that's their number. Maybe that's all they sell is yearbooks. There are people that just sell yearbooks. That's all they sell. I guarantee it. I've seen them. I know a couple that half their inventory are yearbooks. They have got 10, 12,000 yearbooks. So this is a huge market. That's a big money maker for everybody. Any area that's small in a niche like this that has 26,000 items sold overall is a pretty good area. So again, that's what I have. Yearbooks, BOLO every day of the week. I look for them all the time. I buy 1 or 2 every single week. Sometimes it's up to 100 or 2 that I'm buying at once. Well, there you go. That's yearbooks. Hopefully that gives you some real good ideas. And again, I try to pick them up all the time. New ones are great because even when they were brand new, they still cost $30 or $40 a piece. And once it's been past the time, you can't just get one reprinted. So that's why they're worth some money. There's only a limited number of each one made. They usually don't press a whole bunch more over and above the amount of students. So, and as you know, people pass away or they're older ones or whatever the case may be, there's fewer and fewer of those available. So, you know, but not everyone's worth a ton of money. But again, as I said, you're probably going to at least triple your money if you don't pay more than $3 for each one. But there we go. Hopefully you learned something. If you did and enjoyed the video, please hit the like button below. Hit the bell icon up top if you want to be notified when we have new videos. Subscribe and tell a friend.